Hello class, and welcome to lecture 20 of Philosophy 205. In this lecture we discuss free will and determinism. We're moving on from the nature of the mind itself to how the mind works, whether free will is possible, and what challenges there are to understanding free will and the existence of free will. The question we're asking in this lecture is, does free will exist at all? Before we get into more detailed theories about the nature of free will, we're going to discuss some potential challenges to the existence of free will in the first place, arguments claiming to show that free will cannot exist. To start, let's consider a principle that seems to be true of anything qualifying as free will. Think about some things that you'd expect have to be true if free will exists. What does something have to be like in order to count as free will? When does an action count as being due to your own free will? So if you think about a lot of the decisions we consider to be of our own free will, such as deciding what we are going to wear this morning, or whether we would stay in or go out, or where we would go for lunch. Generally, the assumption is, if that really was a free action, that action was only free if you could have done otherwise. This is common to how we think about free will. The reason I think my choice of what shirt to wear was due to my free will is because I could have chosen to wear a different shirt. The reason I think my choice about what to have for lunch was due to free will is because I could have chosen to have a different lunch. On the other hand, if I was forced to wear this shirt today and I had no other choice, then my decision to wear this shirt was not of my own free will. This seems to be a clear principle governing free will. If an action is genuinely due to free will, then you had a choice. You could have done otherwise. Now, this principle, along with some other arguments, other assumptions, can be used to argue against the existence of free will. Now, how do we do that? Well, it starts with determinism. What is determinism? We can define determinism this way. Determinism says that the state of the universe at a time, combined with the laws of causation, completely determine all later events. Therefore, if determinism is true, then once the laws of nature and the state of the universe are specified, all future events are completely set, every single detail of them for all time. Illustrate it this way. If determinism is true, then that means at the moment of the start of the universe, the state of the universe at that time, given the laws of nature, completely determined everything else that was ever going to happen, including me giving this lecture right now and you listening to it. All of that was completely determined at the moment the universe began. Whether the universe began with the Big Bang, or when God created it, or however it began. So as this graphic says, according to determinism, the universe is pre-programmed, set on its path by its starting conditions, playing itself out. No room for variation or, quote, free choice. Life is not even a road, it's a railroad track. The idea is that the laws of nature specify exactly how everything will behave. And once you set everything up, once you get all the particles in the universe in their initial positions, then the laws of nature determine completely exactly where everything is going to go. And so one common argument in favor of determinism is that the laws of nature should determine everything that happens. That's the idea of being a fundamental law of nature, that the fundamental laws of nature govern everything that happens. And there isn't anything that's beyond the realm of the laws of nature. Therefore, once the universe begins in a certain state, the laws of nature prescribe exactly what everything is going to do. But if this is correct, if determinism is true, this raises some problems, which you can probably already see. Because the issue is, did you choose the laws of nature? I have here Einstein's equation from general relativity. Did you choose for the universe to at least approximately obey this law? I'm guessing if you think about it, you'll conclude, no, you absolutely did not choose for this to be a law of nature. And did you choose the past state of the universe? Let's say, right at the very beginning. Was it your choice that determined what the universe would be like right when it began? Again, if you think about it, unless you're convinced that you are God, you probably don't think your choices have any effect on what the universe was like when it began. After all, we didn't exist then. But putting this together with determinism, we end up with a problem. The problem is, if the laws plus the initial conditions of the universe determine your actions, could you actually have done otherwise? If determinism is true, the laws of the universe plus the initial conditions of the universe completely determine everything you have done and everything you will ever do. And it looks like, given those laws and those conditions, that's the only way things could have gone. There's nothing you could have done to choose a different path. There's nothing you could have done to put on a different shirt. There's nothing you could have done to have a different lunch. So this looks like a serious problem for free will. If we're really going to hold on to the principle of alternative possibilities, it looks like that causes a problem when we combine it with determinism. And we can put this into argument form in a couple of different ways. The first is called the distant causation argument. Now, it relies on some plausible assumptions about free will and determinism. So this says if an action is free, then the agent is responsible for it. This seems right. One of the reasons we're concerned about free will in the first place is because free will is closely tied to responsibility. We want to be able to assign praise and blame. We want to hold people responsible for what they do. But we don't hold people responsible for actions they had no control over, for things that were completely accidents, for things that they were forced to do. If a hurricane pushes somebody over and that makes them fall into a window and the window breaks, we don't hold them responsible for breaking the window because it's not something they had control over. Whereas if an agent does something freely, if it's their own free choice, then we do hold someone responsible for it. So there is this close connection between free actions and responsibility. That's premise one. Premise two is agents are not responsible for actions caused by factors out of their control. Now, when I say out of their control, I mean completely out of their control. So if, while you were sleeping, a hurricane picked you up out of your bed and blew you across town through a window, now all of those features are completely out of your control. There's nothing you could have done about the hurricane doing this. It's really unlikely that this would happen, but just let's assume it did. So if it's completely out of your control, it seems ridiculous to hold you responsible for doing it. After all, if it's completely out of your control, there is nothing you could do to stop it. And so we can't hold you responsible for it. But now, assuming determinism, every action is caused by factors out of the agent's control. In particular, every action is caused by the state of the past plus the laws of nature. So again, if determinism is true, then the way the universe was at the moment it began, plus the laws of nature, completely determine everything else that's going to happen. So everything you've ever done, was determined by the state of the universe when it began, plus the laws of nature. But we already argued that those are out of your control. We don't have any control over what the laws of nature are. We didn't choose them. We don't have any control about what happened before we were born. There's nothing we could do before we even existed. So the things responsible for all of our actions, the past and the laws of nature, are completely out of our control. Therefore, no action is free, because given all of the assumptions, everything we've ever done is completely due to things that are entirely out of our control. But since they're entirely out of our control, we're not responsible for anything we ever do. But if we're not responsible, that means we can't be free. Because free actions, we are always responsible for free actions, the actions we do of our own free will. Therefore, this argument shows that no action is free. Free will does not exist. Again, the reasoning here is actions we perform of our own free will, we're responsible for doing those. But determinism shows that we aren't responsible for anything we ever do, because everything we do is caused by things completely out of our control. That means there are no free actions. Now, what do you think about this argument? Is this a good argument? Do you see any assumptions that we could question? Ways that we could argue against it, attack this argument? We will come back to different ways to address this argument later, but for now, I just want to present it as a problem. There's another version of the argument called the no alternate possibilities argument. And this one goes like this. First premise, if an action is free, then the agent could have chosen differently. This is basically the principle of alternate possibilities. The assumption that if free will really does exist, then actions that are performed by free will mean that there was a choice. If you did something of your own free will, you could have done something else. Whereas if you couldn't have done anything else, then that's not really free will. Second question, agents couldn't have chosen differently. Again, this is the assumption of determinism. So the explanation here is, again, given the way the universe was before you were even born, and the laws of nature, everything that was going to happen was already determined. So there's only one way the universe could unfold. This includes your actions. Everything about your actions had to unfold the way it did because the state of the universe plus the laws of nature determined that it would be that way. So you couldn't have chosen differently. Everything you ever thought is already set. Therefore, no action is free. Again, this takes a plausible claim about free will, that if you really do have free will, then the actions performed of your free will, you could have done something else. But if we think determinism is true, then there's only one way the future of the universe could go. There's nothing else that could happen. Either it's determined that I'm going to wear a red shirt tomorrow, or it's already determined that I won't. That's set in stone by the way the universe was and the laws of nature. And there's nothing I can do to stop it because everything I'm going to do is already determined by that. So this raises a question. What should we say about determinism and free will? Have these arguments shown that free will does not exist? Well, one possible save for free will is to deny determinism. So maybe if our actions aren't determined like the previous two arguments suggested, then our actions can be free. Both of the previous arguments depended on the assumption that determinism is true. So it looks like if we deny determinism, that might be a way to get around those arguments. However, there are arguments against free will that assume indeterminism. So, as you might expect, the definition of indeterminism is that determinism is false. The question is, does indeterminism make freedom possible? That's the proposal by denying determinism. The issue is, this seems to imply that choice is just random. If our choices aren't determined beforehand, then what's the alternative? Looks like the alternative is that the choice is random. Now suppose our actions are random. What I'm going to do tomorrow is not yet determined, but what's going to happen is tomorrow, when the moment occurs, I'll randomly choose one thing or I will randomly choose another. The question is that free choice? Now that doesn't seem like free choice. It seems like when we talk about doing something of your own free will, we aren't talking about doing something randomly. If you flip a coin to decide what you're going to do, that doesn't seem like you're choosing it. It seems like it's determined randomly for you. We can refine this and make it a stronger argument against free will. So the issue is, what really is causing your choice, and is it free will if it's caused randomly or indeterministically? So something causes you to do what you do. Let's suppose that what causes you to do what you do is indeterministic. So given the way the universe is now, there are genuinely multiple things you could do in the future. There isn't one future that's already set. That means something is going to cause you to do one thing rather than another. The question is it free will that's going to cause you to do one thing rather than another? Well, what would that mean? If what causes you to do something in the future is reasons, so your choice tomorrow is going to be based on the reasons that you have, that seems like it's going to be deterministic, because what's going to make you choose tomorrow is your reasons. If you choose based on the reasons and the reasons lead to one choice, then that's deterministic. So that's not indeterministic. But what's the other option? Looks like the other option is that it's just indeterministic random factors that cause you to act. And the problem is, many of these seem like they're still factors beyond your control. So for example, let's assume that what's going to determine what you do tomorrow, when you get to the point where you're making the choice, there are genuinely multiple things you could do, and something is going to cause you to do one of them rather than the others. Well, maybe what causes you to do one thing rather than the others is the electrons in your brain, due to quantum mechanics, could randomly move in one direction or another direction. And depending on which direction the electrons move, you'll make one choice or a different choice. Now the issue is, the direction these electrons move is not in any way under your control. You can't choose to influence the quantum mechanical behavior of the electrons in your brain. So here, determinism isn't true. There are genuinely multiple things you could end up doing, but what causes you to do one rather than another is just random events in your brain that you have no control over. So we can go back to the distant causation argument and say, even if determinism is false, you're still not in control of your actions because it's just random things that happen to you that make you do one thing rather than another. It's not your decision, it's not free choice, it's just random events, and therefore there is no free will. So the problem we're faced with is this. It looks like if determinism is true, then there's no free will. But it also looks like if indeterminism is true, then decisions are caused by random events, and we still don't have control over random events. That's just what it means to be random. They're not controlled. So then there's still no free will. And the problem is, can anything lead to free will? determinism and indeterminism are defined so that one of them is true. Indeterminism just says determinism is false. So either determinism is true or determinism is false. And we have arguments suggesting that either way, free will can't exist. So this leaves us with the question, can free will exist? Is there something we're missing here? Is there some way that we can explain the existence of free will despite these problems? In the next few lectures, we will look at different ways to explain how free will might exist despite these issues. All right, I will see you in the next lecture.